Okay, so this is another assumption argument. This is test 57, section 2, question 7. So here, let me restart all this. So let's go to the problem. So if one of the following, if assumed, enables the essayi's conclusion to be properly drawn. Okay, so it's an assumption problem, right? Like, I mean, we just know it from this word right here. So we have Lessing, which is some guy, contended that an art form's medium dictates the kind of, so the medium dictates the kind of representation that must be employed for the art form to be legitimate. Painting, for example, must represent simultaneous arrays of colored shapes, while literature, consisting of words read in succession, must represent events or actions occurring in sequence. Claim that literature must be rejected, however, okay, so that seems to be the conclusion, if one regards as legitimate the images poems, which consist solely of amalgamations of disparate images. So what's happening here is Lessing is saying that the medium of the art form determines how representation can come about, right? So in painting, right, the medium is painting, and that means that representation must come about in colored shapes, right? So, and this is probably a pretty broad definition of shapes, so like people and animals and dogs, and all those would be considered shapes here. And he's saying so that similar to how painting requires colored shapes, literature requires words that represent events or actions. And this claim must be rejected if you think that images poems are real poems, because images poems are just amalgamations of disparate shapes, right? So let's say you have an images poem, and I have a square, so I might have a circle, and then like a line, and then a circle, and then like a line, and that would be considered a poem, but it's just an amalgamation of images, right? And so if you consider it a poem, it breaks this idea here, because it's not words read in succession for sure. It might represent events or actions occurring in the sequence. We don't know. And so right off the bat, right there, right? So we know that it's not words read in succession. It might represent events or actions. So we go to our answers, and that's A right there, right? So it says amalgamation of disparate images cannot represent a sequence of events or actions, right? So that takes care of this issue here. So A seems to be the right answer, but let's go through the rest of these just to make sure. So B, poems whose subject matter is not appropriate for their mediums are illegitimate. So that one's good too, right? Poems whose subject matter are not appropriate for their medium are illegitimate, because we know that the art here are drawing, shapes. It's not a legitimate way to show. It's not a legitimate way to show literature, right? Because literature should be words read in succession. However, we come to the same process. So this would be right there. It seems like a very good answer. One problem with it is that we have the same issue where must represent events or actions occurring in sequence. And if we don't pick A, then we don't know for sure that amalgamations of disparate images do not represent events or actions, right? So it might be that like a circle, and a line might actually represent some actions occurring in some sequence, and we don't know that that's not true unless we pick A. So that's the problem with B. Although B seems to be outside of that, like if A was not here, B seems to be the second best answer. C, Lessing was not aware of the images poetry consisting of amalgamation of disparate images. So C might very well be true, right? Like Lessing might have said this several hundred years or something before images poems were ever conceived. Sorry about that. Lessing might have said that a long time before images poems were ever conceived, but and yeah, so it might be true that Lessing, never knew about this, but that it still could mean that Lessing would just consider them illegitimate, right? So it like C kind of wants you to think that oh, Leslie didn't know about these, and if he did know about these, he would have said something like different or not made that statement. But he might still have made that statement and just considered these things completely illegitimate. So that doesn't necessarily tell us that C is not true. And then D, so all art, even images, poems, depicts or represents some subject matter. So D just seems kind of irrelevant, because it might be true that images, poems depict or represent some subject matter, but that doesn't mean that they fit with the medium, right? So obviously they depict some subject matter, like if it's a square and a square and a line, that is a subject, right? Like you're physically creating something, but that doesn't mean that whatever you're creating works within Lesling's thing, which is kind of what the conclusion is about. And D, all art represents something either as simultaneous or successive. So again, the same thing as D. That might very well be true, but it doesn't help us with our issue, which is proving this conclusion, right? So let's say 1010 is simultaneous, which E would be okay with. That still means this fails as literature because it's not in sequence. And so that's the problem with that. And let's see if A is correct. A is correct.